Hello, everyone. Let's see, it's 12:29. We'll get started in just a minute. Let me remind everybody to please mute your microphone if you're on the computer or on your cell phone. Different ways to do it in both situations, but please make sure you're muted. We have a lot of people on the call today. All right, it's 12:30. Scott, let me just check and make sure you can hear me okay, if you'll be my checker. Scott Eckelberger, you there?
I am.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so welcome everyone. We appreciate you joining us today for the Vaccine Town Hall. Very large meeting. This is probably testing the limits of Teams for us for the first time. The Teams allows us to have up to 350 persons signed on. I know some of you are calling in, as well as others who have joined via the link. And maybe a webcam. So those of us who are speaking will be on cam today, and I would ask everybody else to not be on cam, and that way we can assure that the signal's coming through appropriately. So as you know, last week we were one of the first in the state to receive the vaccine, and the first shipment was of the Pfizer vaccine, and we've been rolling the vaccine out based on employees with the highest risk of exposure. And we found that there is some hesitation among employees taking the vaccine, and I've been hearing that for several weeks. So as I shared in an earlier document that was sent out by email in one of the CEO updates, I did take the vaccine as part of the vaccine trial, the Pfizer vaccine trial, through a company here locally called PMG Research. So I was in that last phase of the testing the vaccine. So I received the vaccine myself in August, and then 21 days later in early September. My experience was very minor. After the first vaccine, had no effects. After the second vaccine, I did have a fever, mild fever for about 8 hours. And at the time, did not know whether I had actually received the vaccine or received a placebo. And the fact that I haven't had a fever, I took that as a good sign. I did go on my own about 6 weeks later to Quest Labs and had antibodies drawn, and found out that I had COVID-19 antibodies. So again, more evidence that I likely received the vaccine. And then as Pfizer was approved, they did contact folks in the medical field and unblinded us. And I've talked to several people who also participated in that trial, some who received placebo, but I had received the vaccine. When I look at the research and development that went into the vaccine, really it's a modern medical miracle. And I understand that many people have questions about its safety and whether you should take it. And so that we're going to try and answer those questions today, or at least give you some more information to help you with that. So I'm here asking everyone that is an employee here at CVMC across the entire health system to consider taking the vaccine. It's really important for you, for your own health, for the health of your family. And if we stay well, we can continue to take care of people in the community. I also want you to have the opportunity to ask some of our experts your questions. And so that's what we're going to do here today. So first, let me introduce the folks who are going to be talking. First is Amy Holler. Amy's a pharmacist and one of the leaders in our pharmacy department. Ava Taylor is the administrator for rehab services and has responsibility for our employee health service. And so Ava has been a huge leader in ensuring that we're rolling out the vaccine to everyone appropriately. Then Dr. Drew Chesson, who is our chief medical officer and a family practice physician in CVMG, and Dr. Phil Green, who is the leader of our hospitalist service. And the process will be Amy's going to speak first, and then Ava will provide some information, and then we'll do some question and answers that Ava's going to moderate. And then at the end, you'll have an opportunity to ask additional questions. So with that, I'm going to turn my camera and my microphone off. I'll still be here, and I'll turn it over to Amy Holler.
So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today about this exciting vaccine. I do want to, I'm going to share my screen, so I should go off camera so that you can see. I was asked to specifically talk about the efficacy, the design of the clinical trials, and the safety of the vaccine. And I wanted to just mention I had a lot of support from our department. We have a lot of clinical pharmacists that have been working on really understanding this vaccine, and Stephen Briggs was big in helping with the development of the content here. So I first wanted to just show this model that a lot of you have probably seen. This is the COVID-19 virus model, and highlighted in the model here is a spike protein, which is what allows the virus to enter our cells. And what we've seen so far with this virus is that no matter how many mutations have occurred or which version of the virus we look at, they all consistently carry this spike protein, which is what allows the virus to be effective by entering the cells. So once this spike protein was identified, this is what kind of began the concept of the mRNA vaccines, which are the two vaccines that are available on the market right now. And I wanted to kind of just describe what the mRNA vaccine, how it works. And this mRNA vaccine is not new technology. It's something, mRNA is something that's been studied for quite some time, but they were able to stabilize the mRNA, which has been the tricky part of using mRNA as a virus, or as a vaccine, by putting it into a lipid capsule. And this is what makes it stable enough to use as a vaccine. So the mRNA enters into, through the vaccine, comes into our body, it enters into the cell. It never enters the nucleus or has any interaction with the DNA. It uses our own cells' capability of creating a protein by using the mRNA message. And once this protein, which is the spike protein, is created, the mRNA is basically gone from your body. It's broken down. So the spike protein is then released out into your cell, and that's, or into your body, and that's what actually prompts your immune response. Your body sees it as something that shouldn't be there, just like if you were to actually have the virus, and it develops an immune response that will help it in the future, if it's ever exposed to the actual virus, to know how to react and get rid of it before there's any problems. And so that's basically how the mRNA vaccine works. The other thing I wanted to mention about the mRNA vaccine is that it's not a live vaccine, and that's one thing that's come up as a concern about other vaccine technology, but this one is not a live vaccine. So as far as the development process goes, I think there's been some concerns about how rapidly this vaccine came to market. So I kind of wanted to go over the actual development process and why we're not concerned about the steps that were taken to get this vaccine to market. So if you see in this slide here, it shows the development process. At the very beginning, the vaccine concept was created in January, around January, February of 2020. And once they were able to prove the concept, they did do animal studies, which is similar to what you would see in any other drug study. And then it went into phase 1 studies, and then finally into phase 2 and 3 studies. And so as you can see, we had there was 44,000 people that actually received dose in the phase 2 and 3 studies. So it was a large population that was evaluated. It wasn't a small study. And one of the things that allowed us to get the vaccine faster was while we were actually in the study process, what you see in the green, we were also working on what the manufacturing looked like for this vaccine and actually moving into large-scale production of the vaccine. Typically, with drug studies, you wait until you're completed all your phases of the studies before you would begin any production of the drug. And so that's allowed us to move forward quickly. Another big thing to consider with the how fast this came to market is that typically with vaccine studies, they take a long time because you're waiting for your population to actually get sick to see if the vaccine was effective. And in this case, because COVID is such a widely, quickly spreading virus, we were able to get data quickly because of that. And so that's unusual for a vaccine trial. In addition, this is a global effort to get a vaccine available. So a lot of the red tape or limitations that were put in place that slowed trials down in the past were removed in this case because everybody was on the same page with wanting us to move forward with the studies and getting the data available. So as far as the efficacy goes of the vaccine, just to give you some background, the FDA had set a threshold to where they felt like we needed to see at least a 50% effectiveness with our vaccine before it would be considered for approval. And I think that we really, have not seen any type of response like this to a vaccine in the past, how effective it is. So with the Pfizer vaccine specifically, since that's the one that we currently have available in our county, I've highlighted the data here. But after the second injection, 7 days after is when they looked at the rate of COVID infection. In the study group, they showed a total of 8 cases of COVID vaccine. So these are the ones that actually received vaccine. There were 8 cases of positive COVID compared to 162 in the ones that received placebo. And this did achieve a 95% effectiveness rate. And then when you look at severe disease, there were no patients who developed a severe COVID infection in the vaccine group versus 5 in the placebo group. And this data will continue to grow as we get more. They evaluate the study population that was tested with this Pfizer vaccine. They're going to continue to follow for 2 years. So we should have more data coming down the road, but this is just the initial data. So if there's anything that you take away from today, I think this graph is what has stuck most in our minds when we think about this vaccine and how effective it is, and just what, like Eddie mentioned, what a modern miracle it is. This is the cumulative incidence of COVID-19 vaccine or COVID-19 occurrence in the study. So your red line are patients that actually received placebo, and as you can see, it continues to climb throughout the study and the number of cases that were seen. The blue line is actually the group that received vaccine. So there was protection as early as 10 days after the first dose. You can see that the line kind of splits right around, I guess it's probably day 11 or so. And there was early protection as early as 11 days after the first vaccine dose. But as the second dose was received on day 21, you see at day 28, which is where they started the calculations, 7 days after the second dose, you see that the numbers even drop off more significantly. And this is where we see the 95% effectiveness. So if you take nothing away from today, if you just remember this graph and like how effective the vaccine is and how impressive the results were in the initial study. So with all vaccines, we expect side effects, and I think when some of the concerns that have come up are what is the safety of the vaccine? How do we know it's safe? So I'm going to go into the adverse effects that were experienced during the phase 2 and 3 studies. And I want to point out here that this is the side effects after the first dose, so the dose that you would get on day 1. And as you can see, most of the side effects that we see fall under the mild and moderate categories and are what you would expect to see based on your developing an immune response to a vaccine. So this sometimes happens with flu shots as well. Some people say that they feel like they get the flu after they've gotten a flu shot, and that's because their immune system's really kicking in and doing what it's supposed to do with that vaccine. So we're seeing fatigue, headaches, muscle pain, mostly at the site of injection, and then some smaller incidents of joint pain, diarrhea, and chills. And then with the second dose, your body has already received the first dose and started to develop that immune response. So we do see a little higher incidence with the side effects with the second dose. I've heard a lot of people say with the second dose, they just kind of plan to take it easy the day after, knowing that they may have some symptoms. Again, it's similar side effects where you're seeing fatigue, headache, chills, possibly fever. There was a low incidence of fever, but you can experience fever. And then muscle pain and joint pain. All of these are self-limiting. The side effects are limited to 24 to 48 hours. And so again, when you get your second dose, keep that in mind, and when you're getting it scheduled so that you can plan to have an easy day, maybe resting and relaxing the day following. So with all the information, I think the big takeaway here is that we've actually achieved developing a highly effective vaccine at preventing COVID-19 infection. There are adverse reactions, no major adverse reactions that are concerning for any type of, long-term or even severe reactions, and those that are occurring are limited to 24 to 48 hours following the dose. This is a really important tool in ending this global pandemic. I think this is what gets us, protects our families, our community, helps us to take care of patients, and also gets us back to celebrating holidays together with our families. And I did want to also include that there is a vaccine email. If you go into our email system, you can type in vaccine_support and you can send questions. We'll try to get back to you right away if you have a specific concern or a specific question that we can answer for you. Additionally, you can stop by one of the clinics as they're going. We have had clinicians, including pharmacists, at all the clinics so that any questions that come up can be answered. And I just want to include this slide at the very end just as a major takeaway for how impressively effective this vaccine is. So thank you again for letting me share today, and I think I will pass it to Ava.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about our vaccination process. I'll start by saying that we've received some guidelines from the state in terms of how we do our rollout. There are specific tiers related to the risk that our population has as healthcare workers. And our goal is to make sure that we're getting the folks at the highest risk of exposure vaccinated first. So ultimately, our goal is to make sure that each and every person on our staff and our medical staff who want the vaccine will be able to get it, know that we are having to follow a process that is outlined by the state. And we are working in conjunction with other entities in the county, particularly our health department, to make sure that we're in alignment in our goals and our processes related to vaccine distribution. So if you have received email communication that's come out from me, you have been identified in the our top high-risk tier. That being said, there have been some challenges with the state vaccine database related to emails going out. So as a general rule of thumb, keep in mind that if you are in a role, a clinical role with direct patient contact, in a support role where you are interacting in patient care areas, cleaning rooms, delivering food trays, doing fixing things in rooms where you may have the potential for COVID exposure, you are currently grouped in our high-risk group. So just throwing out there for thought that if you have had challenges and frustrations related to getting registered with the email link that I sent out, or you didn't receive an email, you can always reach out through that email address that Amy provided. You can, and we'll get back to you about if you are qualified right now on the list to receive the vaccine and what you would need to do in terms of next steps. We have been able to make some improvements over the course of the weekend and this week in terms of our process, and feel like we are getting into a good groove. I would like to say that we've had an excellent response so far from staff, and especially from our medical staff. And I just wanted to share that, our providers have been, so eager to get the vaccine. And I think that speaks volumes, combined with the information that Amy just shared about the effectiveness of the vaccine and how important it is for us, to really make a solid evidence-based decision about potentially taking this. So let me kind of walk you through a little bit about the process of what to expect if you are receiving the COVID vaccination. So prior to receiving the vaccine, you will have to go through a registration process, either through that email link, which is the preferred method, or you can register on site when you have your appointment. We would like at this point in time for you to schedule an appointment to receive your vaccination. That way we can be prepared, we can try to do some appropriate social distancing and make sure that we have a good vaccine volume ready to go for administration. So you show up to our vaccination clinic, which is located in the lobby conference room. You do a check-in process that hopefully goes pretty quickly and smoothly. We do your vaccination, and then after that, we're immediately scheduling you for your second dose. Vaccine second doses should be administered within 17 to 21 days for the Pfizer vaccine. So our goal is to really go ahead and get you on the books, make that commitment that you come back and get that second dose so that you can achieve maximum effectiveness for this vaccine. Then we would like to monitor you for a brief period of time to make sure that you don't have any immediate adverse vaccine response. So if you don't have the ability to return to your work area and have someone kind of keep an eye on you and be aware if you start to develop some adverse symptoms, we will ask that you remain in the vaccination area in a designated spot where we can just monitor you for a bit. In general, it takes around 15 minutes max for the vaccination process, depending on if there's a bit of a line. And then with the monitoring period, you should be in and out within 30 to 45 minutes at maximum. So one of the key things is looking at side effects. Amy discussed that just a little bit, and I just wanted to go over with you guys some of the things that you may expect. So you may expect some injection site pain, as you would have with most any vaccination. You may have a little fatigue, headache, muscle pain, chills, some joint pain, a low-grade fever, some injection site swelling, injection site redness, potentially some nausea. You may just feel generally unwell, or you may notice some swollen lymph nodes. All of these things are immune responses to the vaccine that you've received and are showing that your body is reacting appropriately to the vaccine. We do have a process in place that we want to report any adverse vaccine responses, and we're reporting that to make sure that the drug manufacturer is aware, and also making sure that the state is aware so that they can track and identify if there are any issues that come up that they should be aware of. I'm asking that if you have an adverse reaction that you would consider beyond a mild to moderate reaction, please report that via our SPOT system with the employee reporting, just like you would if you had an employee injury at work, so that we can be aware of that, and we may or may not need to follow up with you if we need additional information. So if you have questions about the process, just recognize that I'm probably one of your best points of contact. Use the vaccine support email address to ask these questions. Amy and our pharmacy team are a wonderful source of information about the vaccine in and of itself. And in general, I would say please consider taking the vaccine if you have not already. It's a great thing to do. So next on our agenda for the day is just having a little discussion, a question and answer with some of our resident medical experts. So we have Dr. Drew Chesson, our Chief Medical Officer, and we have Dr. Phil Green as our Chief of Staff, who are with us today. And I'm just going to moderate a discussion with them and welcome them to our town hall. So our first question, and I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to send this one to Phil first, to Dr. Green. And can I get COVID-19 from the vaccine?
Okay, that's a great question, and I think the origin of that question really comes from the history of vaccines. And as you may know, most vaccines are developed using the virus that has either been attenuated, meaning weakened, or killed viruses. And so there's always this concern that you might be able to get the virus from the vaccine. In this particular vaccine, there is no part of the virus that is actually present in the vaccine. What you're receiving in the vaccine is a small piece of RNA that allows your body to produce the protein that is found on the outside of the virus itself, and it's that protein that your body will develop an antibody to in order to protect you from the virus. And so in this vaccine, there is no risk of developing COVID-19 from the vaccine.
Dr. Chesson, anything that you would like to add?
No, I thought that was well said.
That's fantastic. So, next question I'm going to pose for Dr. Chesson. Why do I need a vaccine when we know that social distancing and wearing masks works?
So the vaccine's, another tool in the arsenal, essentially, to help you keep from getting COVID. Yes, social distancing helps. Yes, wearing a mask helps, but masking, as you know, is dependent on both people wearing masks. Going to the grocery store where you may run into people who aren't wearing a mask or who don't respect your distance puts you at risk. Also, things like sneezing, coughing, singing many times can actually project much further than 6 feet. So this is just another means of keeping you safe and a more efficient way of keeping you safe that is less susceptible to errors.
Great. Dr. Green, anything to add?
No, I think that's good.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Green, next question is for you. Can mRNA vaccines alter my DNA?
Okay, this is a great question because obviously we're talking about stuff that we just don't have a lot of experience in the community. Now, in the field of science and medicine, we have a lot of experience with DNA and RNA and how they interact. This particular vaccine was developed using technology that allowed us to formulate a piece of RNA that would code for the protein that we had talked about, that spike protein. This piece of RNA is capped with additional messages to the cell that identify that RNA as messenger RNA, which means that its purpose and its only point of attachment, or its only key in the cell, is to go into what's called a ribosome, which is a component of the cell that actually its only job is to produce a protein. And so this particular piece of RNA cannot enter the nucleus of the cell, which is where the DNA is stored. So it will have absolutely no interaction with the DNA itself and only will attach to that ribosome in order to produce the protein that is effective.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, Dr. Chesson, next question is, what is emergency use authorization?
So EUA, or emergency use authorization, is the means by which something is more rapidly approved during an emergency. So in times where you don't want to get out a vaccine quicker than you would through an entire FDA process, it's a means of safely evaluating whether something can be safely brought to the public or not. And both the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine have gotten EUA authorization. Sometimes the criteria that they use are a little bit different. Both of them use study criteria to determine authorization, but the EUA allows outside source material to be used as well as the primary study. Also, for things like a vaccine, information such as how long the vaccine will last doesn't necessarily need to be part of the authorization. When the initial EUA was applied for, it looked like it was lasting 2 to 3 months, and now we know that it lasts at least 3 to 4 months. And in many cases, antibodies are still rising at that point, which, if you were going to compare to like a flu vaccine, may be already going down after 3 months. So it's a safety mechanism that the government uses to ensure that a safe vaccine or medication is delivered to the public in a timely manner.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you. So our next question is, and this is for Dr. Green, if I already had COVID-19, do I still need to get vaccinated?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that the state has spent some time trying to consider how to make recommendations on that. Certainly what we have noticed from our data on patients who have already had COVID-19 is that there is a significant variation in the degree of antibodies that are produced in any given patient. And so based on the fact that folks have had COVID-19, we can't really predict accurately how long they will have an immunity following that infection. And so the recommendation currently is that people that have had COVID-19 should get the vaccine. The only stipulation in that is that we probably want folks to wait about a month before receiving the vaccine after they've recovered from COVID-19. And so, again, the bottom line is we're not sure how long you have immunity following the infection with COVID-19. And so the recommendation is for folks that have had COVID-19 to get the vaccine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Chesson, how long does it take to build immunity after the vaccine is given?
So you'll start to have some immunity 10 to 14 days after the first dose of the vaccine, which will continue to climb. Obviously, the second dose boosts it further, and you saw in Amy's chart earlier, you really saw the separation about a week to 10 days after the second dose of vaccine was given. The last I saw is at 3 months, there still seemed to be improving immunity. So I don't know if the numbers are further out than that at this point, but it continues to improve with time.
Okay. Dr. Green, will getting the vaccine cause me to test positive for COVID-19 later on?
Okay, good question. And the answer to that is yes and no. So it depends on the test we're talking about. And so for the test where we look for a patient that is sick with COVID-19, we typically will use either an antigen test or a PCR test, which measures the viral RNA in the body. And both of those tests following a vaccine should not convert to positive because, again, you're not receiving any of those components of the virus in this vaccine. The one test that may be positive in a patient that receives the vaccine is something that Mr. Beard mentioned earlier, and that is the antibody test, which basically measures your body's response to having had the infection. And that test should be positive following the vaccine.
Right. Dr. Chesson, I think the previous question I asked you this is a good follow-up to that. How long will immunity from the vaccine last?
That is the $1 million question. We don't know. It looks like in the early studies that it's more significant immune response than, say, flu vaccine. But one of the things that emergency use authorization allows for is earlier approval. And so we don't know. They're doing concurrent studies now, so they're still monitoring the original study population, and they will monitor the general population to try and determine how long that will be, so we know when boosters might be needed if they are in the future. The hope is obviously that it will last a considerable time, and we won't have to do a booster, or would only have to do infrequent boosters, but that's to be determined.
Right. Thank you. And Dr. Green, last structured question for the day is, are there any groups that should not get vaccinated?
Yes. So according to the current guidelines for the two vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine is recommended for folks over the age of 16 in the current recommendations. And the second vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, is approved only over the age of 18. The recommendation is also to avoid the vaccine if you've had a severe allergic reaction, essentially what's called anaphylaxis, which is a reaction that causes you to have difficulty breathing or swelling of the tongue or throat. If you've had a reaction like that to any of the ingredients in the vaccine, or have had reactions to previous vaccines that have those ingredients within them. Another question that has come up recently is, what about pregnant or breastfeeding women? And the CDC is currently has approved the use of the vaccine in those populations. The only stipulation in that is that they haven't extensively studied the vaccine in those populations, and so certainly that would be something that would require a discussion with your provider to determine whether or not to proceed with the vaccine.
Great. Thank you both so much for your wonderful answers. Those were very, very informative, and hopefully shed some new light and new information on those topics around the COVID vaccination. So now I would like to open the floor up to audience questions. So if you have a question that you would like to ask Dr. Green or Dr. Chesson, please raise your hand.
I'll just add, if you're on the phone and you want to unmute yourself, the way to do that is *6.
And okay, we have a question from Aaron. I'm going to ask you, Aaron, can you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question?
I just checked. I don't have the ability to unmute Aaron.
And I just checked. I don't think I do. I don't think I do either.
Scott, any suggestions? Well,
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just called on my phone, so that might help. So I've had some community questions from people regarding the use of ibuprofen versus Tylenol from some early concerns, if you could help with that.
So typically, if you're going to use something to suppress fever or pain, Tylenol would be a better choice than ibuprofen. If you can do without either, that's probably your best bet.
Okay, thanks. So it looks like we also have a question from Amy Holler.
Ava, I wanted to share a question that had come across the vaccine support line that I thought may be useful to others to hear. There was a question related to people who have immunocompromising conditions or are taking immunosuppressive therapy and the vaccine. And I think if you want to answer it, that's fine, or I can provide some information as well.
Sure, I can at least address that. That is another population that the CDC has approved to offer the vaccine. Again, it's one population that hasn't been extensively studied with this vaccine, but it is approved in that population.
I'll add, Dr. Green, that the comments that I've provided people that have asked this is that there's a possibility that you'll have a reduced response to the vaccine, but it's also a population that's at high risk of having a severe COVID-19 infection. So that may be something to consider when deciding whether to get the vaccine.
Certainly, and I think in that population, again, I think it's important to be communicating with your provider that manages whatever the source of that immune compromised condition is.
Any other questions? I will just ask one, which is, do you have any information or guidance on how having monoclonal antibody treatment after you've had COVID may affect the timeline for vaccine administration? I thought I had heard some information that if you had received that particular type of treatment, you might need to wait a bit longer to receive your vaccination, but I wasn't sure if you had heard anything about that, because I know we are offering that treatment here now.
I'll be honest, I don't know.
They're currently recommending 90 days from the receipt of a monoclonal antibody specifically for COVID.
Thanks, Amy.
And just to add to that, that would include the convalescent plasma treatment because you would receive antibodies through that treatment.
Alrighty, we have a question from Joni Graham. Do we have any other questions from the group? Sherry Richardson has a question. Sherry, if you'll please go ahead.
So I know that the question came out about monoclonal antibodies, and there may be people on the call that aren't even sure what that is. I wondered if Amy could just go over that briefly.
So we're currently offering two different monoclonal antibodies through our infusion center after hours for patients who have tested positive for COVID and meet criteria. And essentially this is through another emergency use authorization. And the data that we have so far with these monoclonal antibodies is that the goal is to reduce the risk of emergency department visits or hospitalization. And I think we've had, I can't remember exactly how many we've treated so far. I have the data, but it's a 1 hour infusion and they're monitored for 1 hour after. And the criteria is that they can't be hospitalized or on oxygen therapy and must be within 10 days of symptom onset. Of course, the goal is to get patients in as soon as they have symptoms rather than wait until that 10-day mark, but that's the criteria that they have to meet.
Thanks, Amy. We do have another question that was typed in the chat box that is, assuming you continue to receive supply as you expect, how long do you anticipate it taking to cover all employees who want it? Well, I know I can certainly say that, our goal is to continue to vaccinate everyone who falls within the state 1A category. And when we reach the point that we have had good saturation of that population, meaning we've really covered most of the folks in that group, then we will work with the health department to ask the state to open us up then to the point that we could begin to vaccinate the remainder of our staff. We have right now, we have vaccine and we are eager to use that with our folks who fall within the category that we can administer to. And we will be actively monitoring where we are in terms of the number of people that we're vaccinating. Anything else to add from Amy on that?
No, I think that sounds accurate as far as my understanding as well.
Great. Okay, we do have another question in the chat box, which is from Joni. Do we know where the FDA is in approving either of these vaccines that is beyond the EUA?
I don't know that we know the answer to that. That's a lot of internal information. Certainly, this has been a much more rapid response as far as getting the vaccine approved under the emergency authorization. But in fact, I think a lot of the data that will be given back to the FDA from the folks that have gotten the vaccine under the EUA will provide them sort of a rapid way to approve it, officially for generalized use. Amy, I don't know if you know anything additional to that.
I would also guess that they will want data on, to some degree, how long the immunity lasts, which may be a year or two before they do full FDA approval, because it may come with stipulations of further boosters or that kind of a thing. But again, that's the inner workings of the FDA, so probably nobody can give you a real answer for that.
And I'll give an opportunity for another question if anyone has anything else they would like to ask. Okay, if we have no other questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Oh, we do have one more question, excuse me. Upon vaccination, in the event of an immediate reaction within 30 minutes, what's the process for treatment? If we, would anyone like to respond to that? Or I can speak a little bit to what our process is with our clinic, with administration, is we're going to monitor, and based on the severity of the reaction that occurs, we're going to make a determination if we need to call an emergency response team action, or if we need to send you to fast track for more intervention. In general, there's particular course of action that's normally followed in terms of, oral Benadryl administration or EpiPen administration, which would be our first line of defense in the vaccine administration area. Anything the rest of you would like to add?
I would add to that the initial reactions to this wouldn't be anything that is unusual to any vaccine that we give. Generally, we'd be talking about an allergic type reaction that are very common reactions that we have to vaccines, and so it would not be something that we wouldn't be able to handle.
Right. Well, I would like to thank you all for your questions, and I would like to thank Dr. Green and Dr. Chesson for answering so many of the questions that we all had and providing that very helpful information. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Eddie for a few closing remarks.
All right, so as we finish up, there's one more question that just popped up. If someone can address, should I carry my EpiPen to vaccination?
If you if you need an EpiPen for an allergic reaction, you should probably always have your EpiPen on you. So that'd probably be a wise idea.
All right. I want to reiterate my thanks to the panel. A lot of preparation and work has gone into ensuring that we were ready to go. A lot of forethought into ensuring that we had the ability to store the vaccine at super low temperatures that are required for the Pfizer vaccine. So the team that's in place and supporting the vaccination process here, I feel fully confident in, and there's been a lot of work done. The number as of yesterday afternoon, after really 4 clinics, we had, as of yesterday afternoon, 404 persons who have been vaccinated. And just looking at the list of names, I'm going to guess that was probably 70% of those vaccinated to date have been physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, nurse midwives, nurse anesthetists. So I think that says something about our most educated group of clinicians in the organization has stepped forward and said, give me the vaccine. And I think any of you who have heard the stories or seen the effect, the devastating effect that COVID can have, not on everybody, but we definitely have seen it in our health system day after day. So I think it's important for everybody to weigh the pros and cons, make your own personal decision as to whether you're going to take the vaccine. We're here to try and provide as much information to help you make a good decision for yourself. There's places that you can get your questions answered. The email address, the vaccine support email address, Ava's available, Amy's available, our medical staff are available, and we want you to have the right information so that you can make the best decision. There's plenty of openings on the calendar. After today, the next calendar day, Ava, is next Monday.
We're doing vaccines tomorrow. We're administering tomorrow, and we have a lot of openings tomorrow. So it would be great before your Christmas break to get that done. Then after that, we will be having vaccine clinics on the 28th, 29th, and 30th. There'll be more to come in January.
Right. We do know that there is a lot of interest and desire to get the vaccine from those who are not yet eligible. And Ava referenced that earlier. Trust me, we want a vaccine in every arm that we can get it in as soon as possible. So we're going to interpret the criteria as liberally as we possibly can so that we can offer that to every team member here in the health system and make sure that we're not violating any rules. But we want everybody that wants the vaccine to have access to that. So thanks for taking the time today. I don't know, hopefully somebody counted the number of people that were signed in, and I'm guessing we have more than one or two persons on some of the video calls. I'm hoping not too many people in a room, but and if you are, you better have your mask on. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and have a great holiday.